Hello, Stropes here again. So I'm coming back at you with another PQ recap video. This time I ran another off-meta list. Last time I ran Obi-Wan ECL. This time I was running Han 2 Blue, a list that is near and dear to my heart, but with a little bit of adjustments since the original meta that it was designed for. I'll go over kind of my thought process behind building the deck, the way that I did, playing it, that kind of a thing. So I'll do kind of like a deck tech here at the start. We'll go into the individual matches right after that. And then we'll go kind of like what I would do differently going forward, like what I learned from this event. So first off, Han Solo. Like I mentioned before, I ran a list similar to this at the original Kansas City Planetary Qualifier. I mean, like the very first one ever. This was the one where they were almost sent out like 60 promos when there were 120 person events, and they were having to kind of get all the promos to people on time, which fantastic. FFG pulled out all the stops for all of that. But this was way back with the Boba meta. So this list, I guess I should say, it wasn't this one, was designed by David Amarin, and there's a similar like kind of core to that deck. You've got the Force Throws, you've got the Sabines, you've got Yoda, you've got Kanan Jarrus, you've got Poe Dameron. Ki-Adi-Mundi was not out at the time. You've got Obi-Wans, you've got Luke Skywalkers, and then like kind of at the top end, you've got Redemptions. You've got a number of high-cost things. This is one of the original Force Throw decks, along with Cheer It. So you've got like some high-cost cards that you can use Force Throw on yourself if you need to do that. And I've combined that, the other half of that deck, with the Foundation, kind of like merged them together, which is a list by Sarah, who was running Anakin Colossus at the Liverpool. I think it was a sector, maybe it was just a PQ, I'm not sure exactly, but at the event at Liverpool, which had, that kind of Anakin list that people were, started to adopt, started to use. A core part of that, and the part that I adopted from there, was a Stila Guerrera package. Stila allows you, she's got a when played and defeated, you can deal 2 damage to your base to search the top 8 and pull out a tactic. So we've got Takedown, right? We've got Removal, we've got Rival Spot, and we've got Fell the Dragons. We also have Covering the Wing. Now, you don't always, I'm not sure that this was in Sarah's list or not. Sometimes you see this in Anakin list now, but we've got Covering the Wing to give shields to our units, especially good in conjunction with something like Ki-Adi-Mundi to give potentially him a shield when you deploy him. And then it also gives you a unit because it gives you the X-Wing, which helps you reach coordinate. We've also got Covert Strength, which is a smuggleable card. It's also a tactic. You can, it heals a unit for 2 and then gives an experience to it. The smuggle cost is 3. So, we are running Colossus. My thought process behind that was we kind of like want to have a lot of health. We need to be able to last, and sometimes the extra 5 health, will help us do that. I'll go over kind of like maybe not doing that in my like reflection part kind of at the end, because I do think overall, like across the day, like it did kind of mess with my deck math a little bit. Especially if you are planning to even potentially force throw yourself, you're already starting down on cards, and force throwing yourself becomes rather difficult. It's kind of like an emergency valve instead of like something that the deck can easily do and recover from quite quickly. And I was also having trouble just like consistently hitting like my pose on curve, things like that. Just like that one card, especially because of Mulligan, really that's 2 cards. You can kind of think of it at that point. My thought process behind like mitigating that a little bit was like to include a lot of smuggle cards, because smuggle cards kind of act as draw. So the Covert Strengths we can play out of our resource row. Cassian Andor is easy to play out of our resource row. We've also got a main deck tech. This main deck tech is kind of a holdover from Amarin's list, but also just like a nice way again to potentially just like pull that out late game. It gives you a little bit of game into control main deck, but also is sometimes just threatening to like kind of plop that down early game and potentially threaten to pull out one of your removals if you had to resource them early. That kind of a thing. Plus, like I said, the smuggle. We've got draw just by itself, flat draw on Yoda. If Yoda dies, we've got draw on Stila Guerrera. So another kind of way, I mean, like at least of how I was thinking about it was like, would I start on a 33 health base with something like Stila Guerrera's ability, right? To dig the 8, do the 2 damage to your base, find the thing, right? Would I start at 33 and have a search ability on a card on a body like that, right? And I kind of like was leaning toward, yeah, I probably would. But she will draw you cards too, like help you search your cards. We've got Ki Adi Mundi, which draws cards when Coordinate is active. I think I needed a little bit more setup as to, you know, doing that main deck. Stuff like Covering the Wing helps out quite a bit with that because it keeps your units around. Han is damaging them, right? 2 damage to have them come out 1 turn early. But the shield can kind of like protect stuff. Like if someone gets in a game where they realize, oh crap, I need to start trading for their units. Sabine can do this now. Back when Amarin's list was first posted, Sabine didn't have quite as much late game oomph as it does, right? I mean, Sabine is really, I mean, people talk about it as an aggro deck, but it really can also switch into mid-range and a little bit even later than that potentially, especially like that new list we're seeing now with the like the Data Vault deck with like a, you know, other stuff going on, right? So Sabine might be, I mean, especially with that, hitting up harder and later than it used to. But anyway, we've got, then they realize like, okay, we need to like start answering what the Han deck is doing, because Han is really trying to play like stuff that you have to answer every single turn because it's playing like a turn ahead. So it's like, can you answer a 3-cost Kanan Jarrus? Can you answer a 4-cost Poe Dameron? Can you answer a 6-cost Luke? And if the answer is no, I mean, they'll probably lose that game, right? But but when the person realizes it, they go like, okay, well, it's coming out damaged. I can start to like trade and then try and like stabilize and like come back from that, especially depending on the deck. Right? I mean, some decks they can't, but some decks can adjust a little bit, especially depending on how they're built. And we'll see that going forward, especially like into stuff like Cad Bane. Some versions of Cad Bane have a really rough time with this. The Richmond top placing list, right? I mean, I think like that can give it a few problems, but if they're running stuff a little bit like kind of older Cad Bane list, like with Cloud Rider, that kind of a thing, potentially that answering all the stuff we're doing becomes like a little bit easier. The Poe is in there, just like an undercosted, you know, like a 4-cost thing that can threaten Anakin. It can threaten pilot leaders. It can also threaten like a Cad Bane deploy, right? Like 2 turns. Like again, they've got to like answer that, because if they don't answer that, they can't deploy Cad Bane. We are running like 1 rival spawn just like as a kind of backup, another kind of like emergency valve into potential like pilot leaders. I did not know like how many I would see at the event, and so I was kind of like, well, people might be on Vader, and there's not like a lot of great ways to do that besides to try to like, if you think you're gonna put them on Victor leader, to just use takedown on it or something early on. And again, we got like these kind of like high cost stuff. We have split, instead of like running like 3 crates, we're on like a Chewbacca, just again because it's got like the smuggle, and it's something that you can you'd like resource early and then go from there. Sideboard, we've got 2 power failures. Now, this is something that you could consider main deck. It's not a card you see all the time, but it is a tactic. It costs 2, and it defeats all upgrades from something. So you can pull it from Stila, and a card that gave me so much trouble all day was a Chewbacca pilot, and there's again, like not a lot of our like removal is in blue, and Chewbacca makes it so that they cannot be defeated, and so like your fells are dead, your takedown is dead unless you take down the Falcon first, which is hard to do because especially decks that can get out a Falcon turn 1 and then put a Chewie on it turn 2. There's no way for you to get 4 resources by then to kind of get rid of it in advance. And you can't Rivals Fall it either, right? So like none of that stuff works, so you're kind of stuck trying to like force throw yourself, which again is like a little rough with like card disadvantage. I thought that I could kind of like go with this deck, especially like with the banning of Django, because Tarkin Town is what kind of like really gives this deck trouble. So I know like Quinlan, I mean, is probably auto loss just because of all of the discard, at least like in a Colossus version of this build. But I thought Sabine won last week, not Quinlan, so I expected a lot more Sabine, and I played like quite a bit of Sabine when I go to Kansas City and when I go to like other events kind of like around there. So I was expecting, especially because Sabine had already won, so it's kind of like the deck, even though like I knew some people probably be running Quinlan. So that, and I also like Cad Bane. I practiced a fair bit. I didn't practice like a ton with this deck in advance, which I can get to here in a minute. But the practice that I did do, I think was like high quality practice. With solid lists, solid players, and I could win, right? It was like 50-50, like at the very least, especially again, depends on the list. A Cloud Rider list, a little more unfavored, but a Richmond list, this was doing quite all right, like at the very minute. Like I did not feel like it was an auto lose by any means, so I felt like fine into it, because even like a 50-50 match into like a Tarkin Town is like fine, especially because, you know, like people be running like Hero Data Vaults, they'll be running like Sabines, they'll be running like also potentially just kind of like random stuff because the field is a bit open. So I thought people might be running, you know, different things. But anyway, back to the sideboard. We've got a power failure there. That is to answer pilot leaders in case we don't draw into our pose. It's also there to deal with Chewbacca's, but depending on the meta and how things go, I mean, you might just be in main decking these, especially over something potentially like a covering the wing might be a little bit more useful. We've got our other copies of tech here, because like against control, we want to be like making sure that we can like open up our resource row again, resource them early, and again, I mean, pretty good into like discard sometimes too, because you can really resource these early, so they can't discard them, and then you can just like play them out, and if they can't, you know, kill them right away, you can start to get your stuff back. Sideboard, we got like a Village Protector too. Got like two of those just in case. I did not get a ton of practice into aggro. When I took the original Amarin list, or there's something quite, I'm calling it that. I made a few adjustments, but it was basically Amarin's list. I went 4-0 against Sabine's. Like my losses were just like, it was like Bosk. I fought like the one Bosk player. I looked at the meta breakdown later. I felt like the one boss player, maybe there were two, the one Cad Bane player on like high end like Emperor Palpatine's, right? And back then, I mean, this deck was again like a bit more rough into Cad Bane than I think it is now, but like I was fighting like quite a lot of like off-meta decks, but like fine into Sabine. So I thought, well, like maybe I just like, I'm not sure, because Sabine has a lot of new tools that Sabine did not have back then. I'm going to put in these Village Protectors just in case, because it does like help you tie up the ground quite well. I did debate between that and the Concord Dawn Interceptors. But again, I can kind of go over that later. And then we've got like the rest of our removal just to kind of fill stuff out. We've got like a Fell the Dragon. We've got another Takedown. We've got a Rival's Fall, just to kind of like customize. Like right now, it's kind of a toolbox. You're kind of trying to fetch what you think you'll need for the matchup or for that specific turn. Like what is going to kill you? What do you need to answer? And this just helps us like tailor our removal to the specific matchup. And another Chewbacca just for like a bit of late game pressure. But I think that fulfills the deck overall like deck tech portion of this thing. So I'll go right into match number 1 here in a second. Okay. First list that I went up against was Admiral Ackbar, Cunning deck. So sometimes you run into these kinds of builds, especially like in earlier matches, and even like competitive events and Star Wars. People be running, you know, stuff that they just think is fun. This player was great. They had I think it's a trap leader sleeves. I guess it wouldn't be leader sleeves, but Admiral Ackbar sleeves with the kind of, you know, he's making the face on the back of the sleeve. So the stuff was just kind of like Ackbar themed in general. Might have even had like an Ackbar mat. And this deck is, I'd say, yeah, around like C tier, you know, which is fine. They can sneak a number of wins though, through stuff like Cunning. I was like quite worried about that because, I mean, you think you're ahead. Ackbar's ability to kind of like tap down your stuff combined with stuff like Cunning and then like pump spells, as well as, you know, like a lot of bounce, I mean, can kind of surprise you sometimes, especially if you're like not accounting for it. So I was like spending a lot of time removing their units throughout the game to make sure that they didn't have anything to be able to buff. That build usually though runs like cartels, gosh, they might be, I wanted to say like spacers, but that's not what I mean. I mean, crafty smugglers, I kind of get them mixed up. Crafty smugglers with the shield, and if you're in heroism, you might also be running leets, sometimes both of them together, because the shield gives them like a pretty good body to hold that Cunning to be able to like hit for 6 or 7, or whatever, especially if you've got like a blaster or things like that, and can kind of push out quite a bit of damage. But anyway, I was able to like successfully trade with units, get up into my late game, and then be dropping stuff like a Crate Dragon. So and then I mean, like, Ackbar is okay, I can like tap, but you get to a point where you can just like claim, and they can't really do anything about stuff like your Lukes. And I also, I mean, like, they were definitely like on Bodhies, you know, discarding like your events, but I was like you start to like resource most of your events. So especially with Colossus as a base, you don't like play into their discard. So sometimes these lists also run Ahsoka and can like run into a similar problem like with Quinlan, where they can like discard you, which my deck is especially vulnerable to, starting out a card down. So but anyway, it was a smooth sailing. I wasn't in any particular trouble throughout the those matches. So I went 2-0 there. Now, round 2, we went up against Cad Bane. This player made top 8. I'm not exactly sure where they finished, but top 8 list. So I put it on here because it's actually posted in SWU Competitive Hub for that. Ended up going 1-2. I won round number 1, and I had some trouble closing out the other games. So this version of Cad Bane is a lot rougher into my build in particular, because it is running 3 Cloud Riders. The 3 Jabba the Hutts can also get because they've got the 8 health. You can use stuff like hot shot blasters on the Jabba and like be trading for units. So I think like maybe what happened first game was a little people don't have like a ton of practice into Han Blue, especially if you weren't playing the game way back then. So you might not know what to do. I think they made the right plays in the, second and third games, in the sense that they started to like trade for our units, because they could like trade and also drop something. And when they got into a point of the matches where they could like trade, keep like a Jabba around with a lot of health, and then like drop something else, or even like Cloud Rider something, and then play like another small unit, and then kind of like it ends up 2-for-1ing us essentially. So this the Han 2 blue list does all right into stuff like the Richmond list, but the more kind of trading that the Cad Bane list can do, especially like low to the ground trading, it makes it quite a bit rougher. So this deck was kind of like really tailored into kind of like messing with what our deck wants to do. They had these Ruthless Raiders too. Ruthless Raiders give us a fair bit of trouble because they dodge both Fell the Dragon, being 4 power, and also needs to be 5 to be hit with Fell, right? But also dodges Takedown because it has 6 health. So I answered it with Luke in the first game, but like outside of that, you kind of got sloppy answers, and they're gonna keep like hitting you in the sky and then like start to like spam the ground. I almost had them in game number 3. They were at like 19 health. They used their Cad Bane to steal my redemption that I had used to heal. I think like I went back down to around 11 or so. And then I played another unit they claimed, and then they have this one sneaky copy of Dryden Voss even main decked in this list, and they stole my redemption. Dryden Voss allows you to play it, so you get the when played ability of that thing. So they went back from, like me being able to threaten lethal with like an onboard Poe or Luke to going back to 11, and then they've got a Cad Bane on board that they can hit me with, and now a Dryden Voss they can hit me with in the subsequent turn, and then they just like spam the ground with like these kind of small things that about like 10 damage back to me anyway. So I mean, the match was like really close. I think like if they did not have Dryden Voss, I might have been able to get the win, just because like I said, they were around like 20 health. They're on a 25 health base. I just needed to stick something, whether that was redemption in the air or something like that. But even then, they've got like these contracted jump masters, which I don't think make all Cad Bane lists either. So again, it's this Cad Bane list in particular can give the Han list quite a bit of trouble, but it really just depends on the build. The Richmond build, less trouble than this list, which gave me a fair bit of trouble. It was not that the games were like unwinnable, and they were all fairly close. It was not like I got like completely blown out or anything like that. I did have like one misplay in game number 2 where I did not get Steela's ability on death, but I don't know if I would have used it anyway. I was kind of they were racing me, and I don't know if I would have dealt the 2 damage to my base on purpose at that point, because I don't know if I could have pulled something. If they had a Ruthless Raider out, there's not a lot of point in doing that, because I'm just gonna draw a takedown or draw a Fell the Dragon, and it's not really gonna help me out all that much. But good player, and the matches were close, but we ended up 1 and 2 there. So going into round number 3, we fought a pilot Boba. Now this list I think is quite fun and is near and dear to my heart. I posted a video, running this list like post Triple Dark Raid. I ran it pre Triple Dark Raid. I think it's being played a lot more than it is probably as good as it is. It is not that great. But if it is good against a list, it is good against a Han2 list, because Han2 is putting out like so many damaged units, and if you can dump quite a bit of indirect damage onto stuff, it makes the gameplay really, really, really tricky, because especially with these like IG-2000s, you can't leave 1 health on stuff. So you're having to like put like quite a bit onto your base. Although with the 35, just give you a little bit of breathing room. So especially like if this kind of a deck becomes more meta, I don't really think it will be, but if it ever did, this would be a reason to be running a higher health base. I did not actually need it. Like I said, I was a bit more afraid of this matchup. I have lost into this a fair amount of times. Just because like they can, like I said, they put out so much damage. The Daring Raids also, like, if they're main decking those, can deal quite a bit. I put like my list on here because I really don't. I think it was quite similar to the list that I posted 3 or 4 weeks ago. Like I said, like right after the ban, I think it, was maybe verbatim this list, although I think they were running a Torpedo Barrage, so I'm not sure whether that was in the slot of Waylay, although I believe they waylaid one of my cards, but they were on Torpedo Barrage, so maybe they were just down Devastator or a Ruthless Raider or something, and like up on those. But in any case, like the Vaders give you quite a bit of trouble too, because if you leave like 2 attacks with a Vader will kill something that's got like 2 health left on it, and if you leave like 1 health, the Vader's just going to kill it, then it's going to damage the base. It becomes quite hard to deal with, and especially like I talked about in my video when I was playing the deck, like Vader on a TIE Bomber dodges again quite a bit of removal, just like the Ruthless Raider, which like nerfs a lot of like main deck blue removal. I was really able to just like stick the way I won. I did put like a fair amount on the base. I got out like Yoda, I got out Kanan, and they're like healing you some. So even though they like might be hitting you for 2, you're restoring for 2. And if you've got like Sabine out, you can be like milling multiple cards and getting like the 2 restore basically off of a Kanan Jarrus. So it worked out all right. I was able to like heal enough and like keep hitting them and putting like consistent pressure on them to where it worked out. And I did save my Fell the Dragons for stuff like the Fire Spray, because I think they got them out like each game, and they would come out untapped, and I was like, man, that's gonna hit me 2 times and I'm gonna die. But like I got it out. I got it through in the end. So went 2-0 there. Next match, round 4. This was against a Darth Vader blue. I feel quite a lot more confident into a Vader yellow, a Vader blue, just because it can hit up quite high. It's got like just because it's like arena dodging you, and this is like what gave me like the most amount of trouble really in these matchups was the Entrenched. I believe they've like sideboarded in like the other one into the other matches, but because they're playing like all into space, and even if you're playing like a turn ahead, you like play your Yoda because you're going to heal, then they entrench your Yoda, then you play like your Kanan, then maybe like a turn or 2 later they like entrench the other big thing that you play. It becomes like quite hard. You can't like race them anymore. Like you can play your own Yoda, but you're like kind of down a card, and this is like where the messing with your deck consistency like comes in a little bit of it, at the expense of having like the health, right? So this is one of the matches where I kind of more acutely noticed that, because they're just like entirely arena dodging you, and then entrenching with like troublesome stuff, and then just like hitting you with like a giant clone combat squadron, right? And you're kind of like having to hit yourself for steal it because like you need your Fel the Dragons for those squadrons because they're gonna be hitting you for like 7, if you can't really do anything about that. So I won the first match there. Also, like their overwhelming barrage like pumps their ships oftentimes like into range of Fel the Dragon territory. This sideboarding thing was hard. I don't know if I mentioned at the start. I don't believe I did, but I really only like practiced for this specific version of the build for about 2 days. I thought, because I was so familiar with Han to Blue from the first set, and I played like hundreds of games with it before, and since I was making the deck myself and knew the specific card choices that I put in it, it was a little bit made a bit more sense to me than I don't know. You don't always want to just like switch off of a deck. I had been playing Cad Town for like a week and a half before that, but I really just didn't want to go into like a 7-round Swiss and play that deck. It just it seemed exhausting to me, and I thought, well, I'm just gonna have fun. I'm gonna play a deck that I know, a deck that I love, and I really like the play pattern of it, and it just goes a little bit smoother for me. So that's why I went with Han Blue. But the trade-off with that is that you don't, like, especially with sideboarding, you don't get like a whole lot of practice sideboarding. So I was like, this is where, again, and another thing I noticed acutely in this match is like, do you side in the Rival's Fall, right? Is it worth paying that 6 to get Vader on the flip, right? This player started to just like play Vader on the ground, and then like I'm tapping out 6 to kill a leader on the ground when they've got, like 7 or 8 ships in the air that they're still kind of like hitting me with. And so really they're kind of like able to race me if they're able to like stall me long enough and like heal, like with these ships, or like even like with the Malevolence or something. So they were just able to out damage me because they'd play Victor Leader, and like I think they played Victor Leader in each of these matchups, and I'd hit it with the takedown. I always had my takedown, and they always had their Victor Leader. But even that, like, you're tapping out for 4 to get rid of something that costs 3. If they're on the play and they've got like the actions, then they still get like their token, and then just like keep making the tokens. And the good thing is that you can usually like go first, but because they're using like all of their actions to be able to make all of these tie tokens. But eventually, like with that swarm, and then like with the clone combat squadron, a lot of it becomes like they need to answer this or you'll lose. And they have enough removal to kind of like keep hitting you with like a lot of tiny stuff if they draw into their removal, like No Glory, or just like the entrenches to like stall you out long enough, and they just like hit you with like 4 or 5 ties, and then like 4 or 5 ties again, and they just like keep doing that. It's kind of hard to get rid of all of them unless you're in villainy and can just like overwhelming barrage them and get rid of like all of those tokens. There's not like smooth answer to that isn't just like dead into like a lot of other matchups. So that's like another one of those trade-offs. But like sideboard wise, there's like other ways to answer it. But I don't know if like Vader is enough big enough part of the meta to be like even potentially sideboarding stuff to give all their ties -1/-1 or something. But these matchups again were like quite close. I'd at least get them to 20 health each matchup, and it was just like the action economy kind of messed with me a little bit, where like I said, I'd tap out to Rival's Father Vader, I'd tap out to like take down the Victor Leader. I really wouldn't have a board out, or if I did, it would be like a Yoda that they entrenched like and then they just like keep hitting me, and maybe I'd get my Han out, but it really like was kind of too late, and I just couldn't stabilize and then like turn the corner quite at that time. I'm not even sure that I drew my Lukes in those other 2 matchups. So again, messing with the consistency a little bit, drawing less cards with their opening base. But I think it's like winnable, especially like with a bit of like practice and stuff, and definitely not like definitely not a blowout. Go into round number 5 here. So this was against a Sabine ECL. I posted this list. I think the lists were public in Melee. This wasn't like a top placing list, but I just brought this one in particular because it gave me a lot of specific trouble with Chewbacca, Faithful First Mate. Now that card, same thing like within Han Green, is like quite difficult to deal with in a blue shell unless you're like maining your confiscates or something. But as far as like tactics go, like I said at the start, I had a power failure to kind of like deal with that, but it's only in the sideboard, and if they get like a turn one ship, then they put like Chewbacca on it, they're hitting you for like 6 or 7 a turn. If they play like the masterpiece, they put Chewbacca on it, and then they've got like a green unit on the ground, and then they're hitting you for like 7, 8, 9. It's just like really hard to come back with, like even with 35 health, because like none of your blue removal deals with it. You kind of need to force throw yourself to deal with it, and if you force throw yourself, you're getting rid of like a potential like answer that you would be being able to play, and especially if you're starting down on cards, again it makes it like a little bit rough. So I think this is just like all right into Sabine. I went they're like a great record into Sabine, like the first PQ I went in. Now I know that decks are a little bit different now, but really like sans Chewbacca, I think the list is like pretty answerable. I also, there's a number over here which the you know, you're like, why is that number over there, Strokes? This is I played Stila in both of these games at least once, and I whiffed 3 times, 4 times, I think, minimum 3 times. These are the odds of whiffing that many times in a row. So like far less than 1%. And I would like look at it. I'd see my Poe, I'd see my Kanan, I'd see my 2 Lukes. One time I remember, and then it's just like, and then you shuffle them and then you put them all at the bottom of your deck. And you're like, well, there were all my cards. So I mean, like, I'm not trying to like say like it's all luck, because you do set up your own luck, especially like on Colossus, because you're setting up yourself for a little bit less cards and things like that. But I just had terrible draws, to be honest, with Stila. Yeah, they were like total whiffs. It wasn't even like I got Covert Strength or Covering the Wing or some other card that just like wasn't ideal. It was like nothing at all. And I think we got like 8, 9 tactics main deck. The chance to hit is 85 just on one, let alone when played and Death Trigger, which is like higher because you're getting two 85%. So it was just, yeah, real rough. Each game they had Chewbacca, and Chewbacca was on some kind of ship, whether that was a masterpiece or not, and I just like couldn't answer it, and the game was over. I did slot in the power failures, and they had put like a lot of experience on it. The thing was, like, by the time I drew it, it just ended up being too late. There's only 2 in the deck. They had been hitting me for 7, then they like hit me for 8, and then like I had it, and then I could, or like I fetched it, but I didn't have enough resources to be able to play it. So then I get it, and then it's like, well, they're just gonna hit me anyway. I mean, like, yeah, so I could have used it, but by the time I used it, it didn't really matter. And it would have been nice, honestly, because I would have knocked Chewbacca off, all the experience that they were putting on it off also. It was just too little, too late in that matchup, and didn't pull through. So here we go into another version of Sabine, 2 Chewbaccas instead of the 3 Chewbaccas, and this is a little bit more up my alley. I think my one loss again was to a Chewbacca on a masterpiece, but the other 2 matches I was able to just like race them and deal enough damage. Like I said, I think this matchup is slightly favored into Han Blue, whether you're on Colossus or not. But if they get like those really explosive like things that are just like hard to answer, it's just, you know, you're not going to be able to win. But the other matches I did win. We went 2-1 here. I'm trying to remember if there's like any kind of specifics, really, because like you're playing a turn early, and if you stick your Yodas, you stick your Kanans, even like the Sabine player also kind of needs to know what need to do in the matchup. If they are not trading for your units, they're kind of doing the wrong thing, especially if they can like keep one around and get rid of one of yours. So like a Sabine play into a Sabine unit play from a Han blue player is like pretty rough, pretty bad into a Sabine ECL list, because they'll just, a smart Sabine player is going to ECL their Battlefield Marine into it, leave you with no board, and then they're going to play something like a Wing Leader about their Battlefield Marine, and then either like hit your base with a bunch, or like, you know, like they if they know what they're doing, it can be like pretty rough, but you can play around that. Especially by playing stuff like Cassian turn 1, and when I get into the new things that I switch out, like I do a few deck lists at the end going over like what I would change, how I would, you know, like alter the deck going forward. And I think there's like a lot of ways to kind of also like mitigate this and or turn this into something favored. There is that 3-cost unit that Anakin runs now that's shielded, and is like a 3/4, maybe it's just a 3/3 shielded, I don't know, but you can play it with Han, deal the damage, it'll still like leave a health or 2 on it, but it also has a shield because it doesn't die, versus something like Village Protectors, which you can't play with Han's ability because it's 2 health, will just die no matter whether you have the shield or not, right? It's not like it pings the shield off, because that's not how the play ability works. But stuff like that is good because you can play basically like a 3/1 shielded unit turn 1, and then like you're getting like a lot better trades, a lot more cost-effective trades. And that was again like another, if you only play the deck for a day or two, you know, overlook some things like that, that, you know, could help. But anyway, like even without that, I think it's solid into Sabine, a major deck. I mean, like it can do like quite well. We went 2-1 in this round number 6, and then we get into round number 7. So here is my final matchup. Technically, it would have been against a Bosk blue list. I feel pretty good into that because of the main deck techs, and we got like 2 Crate Dragons and a bunch of like other like 3 Lukes. So it's like a lot of stuff for Control to like eat through, and especially if we can like kind of spam the board. This build is a little bit harder to do it with because I did cut down on a number of like the 2-cost things, and you kind of need 1-cost and 2-cost things to be able to spam and kind of get around power of the dark side. But at the same time, it packs like a whole lot of removal, and is like, you know, especially like post side, I think like can do fine and can win into that, because there's really not like necessarily all that stuff that you gotta answer, unless they're playing like a unit heavy version of the build, and it's like a little bit off meta. But this player left, so, hence the lonely Yoda and the empty chairs. So the Yoda is me. The player left. They put like 5 minutes on the timer, and then called the match after that and just gave it to me 2-0. So end of the day, if you count this 2-0, I did go 4-3. It does feel a little not great and a little rough, and I was sad to have missed the matchup because I wanted to give you like an accurate you know, like how this deck would perform, how this deck would do, and it is like messed up a little bit. So I even kind of thought like, well, do I do the recap, do I not do the recap? But I really believe that this Han 2 blue is still a solid deck, still a solid choice in the meta, and especially like I said, even I went like 1-2 against the top 8 player. I went like 1-2 into like the matches that I lost were like close. Even those 0-2 Sabine matches, I mean, like I'd get them up to 18-20 health, and then they'd have, you know, like ECL record, or you know, like something like that, and then, you know, like get me from there. So I mean, like I still lost, I did lose, but none of the games were blowouts. It was not like I got steamrolled in the matches that I didn't. And if anything, this deck is like so toolboxy, it does feel winnable, and you never feel like you're completely like out of the game into any matchup, into any deck, because it does have answers within the deck, within the main deck, for pretty much like from aggro to mid-range to control. Now it's a little bit weaker into some of those, but it really has like a fair matchup into quite a wide field, and especially now with the Jenga ban and a lot of people playing a lot of very different decks, it does well into quite a lot of lists, which is not something you can say about every single deck. So I'll go forward like into my final thoughts here in a second. All right, so we'll go into some final thoughts here. So one of the main things that I thought about over this weekend was that like we might need to adjust tactics. Now, especially this build is a kind of a control build. You can kind of think of it that way. I think it's easier to play when you think of it like as a control build instead of like a mid-range build. But control builds really need do much better like in an established meta because like you know the things that you need to answer and when you need to answer them. An example of that would be Chewbacca, who I talked about a fair bit in my earlier matchups. If that becomes something that you see across Sabine lists, you see that across Han Green, which is another great list, which I don't think made a ton of appearances. One of my friends played that top 8'd at this PQ with it. I had thought about bringing that deck myself, but I get nervous. I'm not going to defeat my resources and don't have a lot of practice doing that, so I didn't want to be doing that on a day where, especially like a bigger competitive event where I might like kind of mess that kind of thing up. So with the list I was more familiar with. But anyway, like long story short of that is that we kind of need to know what we are answering and when we are answering like what. So if there are Chewbacca's everywhere, I put like some stuff on here to kind of answer stuff that we were like having trouble with during the day. So System Shock is a 1-cost way to deal with Chewbacca to defeat just it as an upgrade. So I know we're running like the power failures and the sideboard, but if Chewbacca ends up being everywhere, like maybe we need to even main deck 2 of these. Open fire is another great way to deal with not just Chewbacca, but some other kind of space units, because it's really kind of the only way. I mean, like low cost way, deal 4 to something, kind of cleanly get rid of it. If you can claim and then immediately open fire their Falcon that they ramped into turn 1, like in a Han list, you can kind of like stop them from snowballing and kind of answer them that way. Bombing run, if there's like a lot of Vaders, like we might need that kind of a thing, or like grenade strikes to be controlling their board. Grenade strike allows us to kind of like deal with 2 of their units, not just the TIE tokens, but something potentially a little bit larger that's got like the 2 health. And the bombing run can kind of like semi or at least like pseudo wipe them, and especially if they've got, you know, like those big ships that are kind of like only 6/6s because they've got, you know, like a bunch of small ties. Bombing run will kind of like really easily deal with that. Pillage into control. Now there were pillages in David Amarin's like original Hantu blue list. I took them out. I switched them for Ki-Adi-Mundi because you're playing Ki-Adi-Mundi on 4, and Han's ability doesn't let you play like events or tactics for less, right? So same drop, even though it looks like our mana curve or our resource curve is going up when we're playing Ki-Adi-Mundi. It's really not, because we're playing that like at the same point in the game where we would be playing the pillages potentially. But I think pillages are quite useful, especially if you're on like a force throw package. If you played the, you know, like 30 health base Anakin list that just came out this weekend from Leal, I mean, like the force throws, the pillages, like the discard. I mean, like the discard can really get someone, and I think it might be worth considering putting those back in. And lastly, we got like direct hit, right? There's a ton of great tactics that can answer a ton of different things, and it really helps round out the control suite, especially if you're able to fetch them with Stila, but you need to kind of be running the right things to know like what's going on. So like, right, control does well into like an established meta because it knows what it needs to answer. So we just need to know like what are we answering, like what do we need to answer so that we can like last into the late game so that then we can win. Direct hit allows us to deal with non-leader vehicles, so especially like against decks that are running a bunch of those, like Piet, things like that. Just, you know, like a nice way to deal with that. The thing is, usually those ones that you want to deal with, and the reason why I went with Fell the Dragons is because usually those have 5+ power. Those larger vehicles, that's what you're using the direct hits on. But again, there are things like Ruthless Raiders that exactly dodge Fell the Dragons and takedowns. So again, like adjusting the tactics package based on like what the most played things are is something that we would need to be doing going forward. So another thought is, are we running Cham Syndulla? Maybe we can play Cham on 3. He comes out as a 5/2, so like great that he can threaten Sabine. Like they've got to answer him, they've got to run their thing into him, and if they're running their stuff into him instead of dealing with the rest of what we've got going on, fine into Sabine. But the reason why you're running Cham, right, is because of his one played to you know, put out another resource, so the other decks like Han or green villainy decks, it allows you to ramp, and I think that's good. The thing is, if we are just keeping, if we're keeping the Force, those are trying to keep the Force package and we're trying to keep the tactics, we've got 3 Kanans, 3 Steelas, and not much else in the 4-cost slot, so Cham Syndulla fights them in that slot, but there might be a few flex spots that could open up that we could switch around to make room for Cham, and I think Cham is definitely worth considering. Another thing is, do we need to draw more? I think I don't know. I said at the beginning in the overview, I put the covert strengths in there. I put the Cassian Andors in there, put the tech in there. And then I had the Yodas allow you to draw. Ki-Adi-Mundi allows you to draw. Obi-Wan also allows you to draw if you put it on a Force unit. So I thought if we draw once, we can think of it as making up for starting out with one less card, but that's kind of wishy-washy a little bit too, right? Because you can mulligan at the start and you're seeing another card, right? So it's not exact, but the thought being that if we can smuggle once, if we can draw once, we've a little bit made up for that difference. But I think we can also potentially just put more card draw in there. Queel is one way to do that. So I've made a list that just kind of adjusts and ups the draw a little bit. Queel, we have quite a lot of blue cards in the deck already because we've got the Lukes, we got the Redemptions, we even have a Chewbacca, we got the Obi-Wans, the Ki-Adi-Mundis, and basically all of our tactic removal suite in the base for because we weren't running pillages, we'll draw our Felda Dragons, we'll draw our takedowns, we'll draw our Rivals Falls, right? So I think Queel is one way to go. Cassian Andor as a pilot, as the unit pilot, has an on attack where it can make the opponent discard, and if they discard a card of a certain cost, then you can draw. So potentially maybe even something like Cassian. I just threw this stuff together pretty quick, looking over things that could up our draw amount a little bit. But I mean, maybe even just Queels by himself is good enough to kind of start to mitigate that a little bit more. There's also that ship that ends up being a 3/2 but is a 4/4, but if you deal 2 damage to it, you can draw a card when you play it. It's just Han, I'm not sure if we really want to be playing that card because we can't play it early. We're playing that exactly on curve, and it's so because it would just die, right? Unless we just which I don't think is worth it. So anyway, this is a version that I thought leaning a little bit more into the card draw aspect of that. Next, space. Do we contest space or do we ignore space? I did not have a lot of luck trying to contest it that much. I usually ended up just kind of foregoing that a little bit, but I think there are playables there, right? The Tantive, you can play that on 6 as a 5/5 Sentinel that makes an X-Wing token, and I mean you're seeing that in some other lists anyway, Han, but that's because they're Han 1 instead of Han 2, but that because you can ramp into that on the 7 turn, but especially if we're dealing damage to our base with stuff, right? I mean maybe even our Resolute, that would kind of answer those tokens forms. So if we're you can already play it for less with Han, so you're being able to play it maybe on 7 but discounted. I'm trying to think, right? You got half on your base, so it really costs 7, but then you play it with Han, so it really costs 6, and then you can kind of I mean I think there's a world where that might make sense, especially if there's a lot of Vader ties around, potentially, at least in the sideboard. Definitely worth considering. But if I had to choose, here's kind of what would I settle on. So here's my list. I just titled it the future, right? What would I do knowing what I know now going forward? I think I would at least test, and this is kind of where this list is going, is these entrenched, right? And then kind of maybe moving a little bit away from trying to compete in the space lane. I did switch out some of those Anakin interceptors for these Concord Dawn interceptors, just because like if you don't draw into the entrenched, you can't just like completely like ignore that. But like potentially, I don't know if we necessarily need those. Maybe if we are drawing enough cards, we're not like down on cards starting out because we're not on Colossus anymore. We're going back to the swamp, back to Dagobah Swamp. Like maybe the force throws combined with like the rest of this stuff is enough. I think I've left 2 Steelas in because I think she's still quite valuable, and against certain decks you really just don't mind taking the hit, especially against something like Control where it like really doesn't matter, and being able to draw into more stuff is always good. But and I've also like kept the Tech main deck. I've really liked Tech. I like being able to turn your whole resource row back into your hand, especially like later in the game when people aren't like necessarily expecting it, and then you can pull out like removal that you had to resource early on. One of the other main things that I've added here, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, is these Outer Rim Outlaws. You can hit them with Han, play them turn 1. They're a 3/1 with shield, so quite good. I thought about like completely foregoing Sabine Wren, but I like how like them, and I don't like switching like everything into 3 cost, because then you get like a bunch of 2 cost stuff. You can, but like the 2 cost stuff is really easy to kind of like jam into later turns, which is especially good against Control because maybe you've got like that 1 extra resource up, and then you want to drop something else. And Sabine is also very, very good into stuff like the Crafty Smuggler. Quite an easy, quick answer to that, especially if there's like lots of yellow decks, whether they're Cad Bane decks or whether they are Han decks. She is like quite good into those, but again, like is also just like bad into Sabine Leader, because they're just gonna like ECL it and kill it if they know what they're doing. And they can't really do that with the Outer Rim Outlaws. So I just kind of like split them between the 2. Like if you're playing against Sabine, just the resource Sabine, and look for those Outer Rim Outlaws, right? Or even like Cassian's fine because he's still like a 3/3 functionally, and if they ambush it, they're just trading. So that's fine. But this is the list I was going with. I also upped the pillages just because I like having the 3 force throws. I like having the 3 pillages and the Poe, because a lot of people, like if people are planning to resource each turn and they're not drawing any cards, you get to a point in the game where like they got 2 cards in their hand, you're leading, they don't have a bomb out, you can just play a pillage, and then like they discard their hand because they like had to resource because they're trying to play like another wrecker or something like that. If you don't have them, I mean, like, yeah, it just becomes like much harder. I mean, that's like another form of removal, right? It's like removing it like from the, like, it's like, are you removing it from hand? Are you removing it from the battlefield? I like having the option to, like just like peel it straight from the hand. So if I was gonna like play this at a showdown or something coming up this week or something like that, like this is like the adjustments that I would make or be like testing throughout the week to then like go forward. I've got the list. I'll have like the list in the description. It'll be like the original list, and I'll also post this future list just because I mean, like, I would keep it updated just on SWU as it is with the Colossus base, and I'll probably keep updating that and trying both of these, the Swamp and the Colossus, but you cannot currently change a base in your list. So like the Colossus list has to say the Colossus list, the Dagobah Swamp list has to say the Dagobah Swamp list, and I mean, like, they would also be built fairly differently too, right? Because I mean, the card draw and that kind of stuff like we discussed before. So anyway, these are my thoughts like as far as like the event goes. If you've got like any questions, anything like that, maybe you've been running Han 2 Blue, or looking for like anything like that, just let me know. If you made it this far, you are a champ. Thank you so much. I'll try and post some videos of this gameplay of this list. I think this list is quite fun. I do think it has a place in the meta going forward, especially now that Django is gone. I know I kind of like mentioned that, but oops, went back a second, but as they're not able to like tap down your big units indefinitely, and they're not able to like, because you're damaging stuff and also like pinging it all, and it just like leaves another deck that isn't full of pings, is not full of constantly tapping your stuff down, and a deck that is not full of bouncing all your stuff with waylays, because it's also in yellow. So the less decks of those there are, like, the stronger this deck becomes. So I mean, I think this deck is a real contender into the meta, if played right, if played well, and also like built well. I should have given myself a little bit more time. If I have one regret about like the event, it's really just that I switched decks like right before the event, which, you know, people always say like never do that, but like I said, I mean, like, I just really wanted to have fun and go with a list that, like, I thought would be fun to play across 7 rounds of Swiss during the day, instead of something that I felt like, you know, not doing that with. But anyway, that'll be it for today. Have a good day. Thanks. Goodbye.